And now, in the interest of time, I think I'll say Happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month, everybody. We're here for the future of children's privacy laws, key trends and insights. I'm Bridget Fonger. I'm a Wolters Kluwer Customer Success Manager. And our very, very special guest is one of my favorite people at Wolters Kluwer, Tony Foley. He is a Wolters Kluwer senior legal analyst who literally has his finger on the pulse of everything that is going on in the world of cybersecurity and privacy. He's an attorney. He's been with Wolters Kluwer on and off, with only one off, a quickie 5 years away from WK, since 1989. I call him the wizard behind the magic curtain of our cybersecurity and awareness library on VitalLaw. And we will see his creations throughout this session and hear his wisdom, as he truly does have his finger on the pulse of what's going on with cybersecurity and privacy legislation. So welcome, Tony.
Very much, Bridget. It's always good to be with you. We do this every year. It's great fun.
We do. It's a habit. It's an excellent habit for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, because we must celebrate it, everyone. So these 3 slides are just going to tell you what we're going to talk about. We're going to have a little conversation, Tony and I. First thing we're going to talk about, of course, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. We're going to refer to it as COPPA. We're then going to talk about how Congress is considering COPPA 2.0 and COSA. And then the final topic that we're going to be covering is the state's efforts to enhance children's privacy protections. But for now, let's get into this conversation with Tony. So in January, the FTC updated its rules implementing COPPA. Can you describe the major changes that businesses operating websites and apps that may target children must be aware of?
Bridget, I think most of the folks that are listening in are aware of COPPA. It's been around since 2000. It was enacted in 1998 and it took effect in 2000. And it's basically the primary enforcement mechanism for the Federal Trade Commission to enforce requirements that apply to websites, services, and apps that handle children's data. They're called operators. And so to implement that legislation, the FTC promulgated the COPPA rule in 2000, so contemporaneous with the law coming out. And so they were providing additional information on how operators needed to comply with the requirements of the law. And as regulations do, it's providing additional information. Those rules have only been amended once previously, and that was back in 2013. So in internet years, that's like kind of forever. Right. So in any event, we were glad to see that in January of this year, the FTC released a significant set of amendments to their COPPA rule, and they took effect in June. So they impose a variety of new requirements on operators, and most of those are the result of rapid developments of new technologies and online data collection practices. We don't have time to go into great detail on all of the amendments, but I did want to mention 2 or 3 of them that are, critically important that people need to be aware of. The new rules update the definition of personal information that's subject to the rule to include specific biometric and government-issued identifier information. And again, that's really a reflection of the fact that biometrics has become such a big way for people to make identifications and whatnot online. And so the rules have been amended to reflect that reality and to provide guidance for operators on processing that type of data. They also have clarified data retention provisions. Under the original rules, no one was really sure about how long you had to keep your data, or how long you were, I should say, allowed to keep your data. And in a number of cases, operators would keep it for longer than necessary. And so the rules now state that you can't keep it for any longer than necessary to fulfill the purpose for which it was collected, and also that you can't keep it indefinitely. And that's a really important change.
Wow.
They They also added additional requirements to developing an information security program for a number of operators that did not have an independent information security program. And then the last piece I want to mention is that the ways in which operators can be able to verify parental consent have been expanded to include some new methods that hopefully are going to be designed to make it easier for operators to actually do this. So that's a piece of good news that operators should be aware of, is that now you have different types of mechanisms for verifying parental consent. So all of this stuff is going to require operators to review their existing notices, their existing privacy policies, to incorporate the changes, make sure they're reflected. But as I was alluding to earlier, the operators should also be aware they can leverage some of these additional parental consent methods, which might streamline the process for them.
That's great. So do you think there's going to be increased enforcement and private lawsuits as a result of this?
Hey, that's actually a very timely question, Bridget, which I think, it's great because it sort of highlights, the sorts of things that we're trying to accomplish with our privacy and cyber dashboard on VitalLaw. Just last week, I believe it's on September 29th, the Justice Department, at the behest of the FTC, filed a complaint against an operator of an anonymous messaging app. It's called Send It. And they've alleged that they violated the COPPA rule because they knew that many of their users were under age 13, but they didn't notify parents that they were collecting the children's information or to obtain their consent. I think that the rules are likely, as revised, are likely to create additional opportunities for the FTC to engage in privacy enforcement. But I do want to just add one quick caveat to that, which is that with the advent of the Trump administration and dialing back on some enforcement activity, not just at the FTC, but at pretty much all of the federal agencies, that any sort of uptick that we might have expected to see from the clarification in the rules is kind of on hold for a while. And then when you also add in the ongoing government shutdown, that just exacerbates that problem. So I think my opinion is that for sure, the new rules do create new avenues and opportunities for the FTC to step up their enforcement actions, and in some cases for private parties to look at these rules and to file civil lawsuits based on violations. But it's probably not going to happen in the short term. It's really more of a long-term thing.
Yeah. So while you were doing that, I was showing the article that you were mentioning. It's in Cybersecurity Policy Report. So a lot of people on the call have the Cybersecurity and Privacy Library that Tony is the wizard behind, right? So if you sign up for the Cybersecurity and Policy Report, that came out on September 30th. But I also want to mention, because you mentioned biometrics. So this area here is kind of the pièce de résistance. You have created so many amazing smart charts, Tony. And I just wanted, because you mentioned biometrics as one of the new, I love that you said the new in the internet years, but biometric information, jurisdictional compare chart. I just want everybody to see that there's do you want to talk to that? And while you talk to that, I'll open up this one, the consumer privacy jurisdictional compare smart charts, so they can just see this. But I'd love to hear you talk about all your amazing smart charts.
That's great, Bridget. The smart charts, there are currently, I believe, 13 charts that deal with various topics, and they're basically designed to provide very quick and accurate, obviously, answers to specific topics that are listed in the smart charts, where you will select a topic of your choosing, select a jurisdiction or multiple jurisdictions, and then get the results of what your query is, what the query that you fed into the system. The jurisdictions include all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, but importantly, because a lot of people miss this, right up there at the top left is federal. And so if you're looking for information on federal requirements related to any of the topics, we'll always have the federal in addition to each state. And so the beauty of this tool is that you're able to select multiple jurisdictions and very easily compare the provisions in a given jurisdiction to those that might be in a different one, or again, the federal the provisions that apply to that particular topic.
Right, and you're going to see some of these, the things that we're talking about today are mentioned in here, but in the future. Tell them your exciting news about smart charts, actually, Tony.
Yes, well, given the fact that children's privacy is really kind of the only bipartisan support thing that there is out there for legislatures, both the federal legislation, which has its roadblocks, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but also at the state level. We have decided that we want to create a chart that is specifically related to children's privacy. And so some of the stuff that we'll be getting into over the course of the rest of our discussion is going to be included in that chart, where you're going to be able to see all of the federal and state laws, a discussion of all of those as it relates to children's privacy specifically, and then have an answer to a specific topic or question, and then follow with primary source links to the actual source material that provide the answers. We are still in the development stages of that, so I don't want to overpromise. I always hate when people do that to me. I think we're probably looking at some point middle of 2026 for that chart to come out, but it's a very exciting opportunity, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from a number of different sources and our current customers and prospects that have talked to our folks who have said that we really need a one-stop shop to be able to just look at this stuff from a children's perspective, because it is kind of all over the place. So we're going to try and provide that. And so, as I said, stay tuned, probably second quarter of 2026.
Yay. Okay, next topic. COPPA 2.0 and COSA being considered in Congress. Can you outline the history of this legislation and what this last iteration of the law looks like for both COPPA and COSA?
I can, Bridget. It's a tortured history, but I'll do my best. So back in June, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee approved Senate Bill 836. It's officially called the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, but people refer to it as COPPA 2.0. So much like the regulatory revisions we discussed earlier, the bill that's out there now that's been reintroduced represents an effort to update the provisions of the COPPA law, again, spurred by advancements in technologies and the various new ways in which operators are collecting personal information. The bill, as it's currently sitting in committee, having passed out of committee, it includes a couple of really important revisions. Perhaps most importantly, it extends the affirmative consent requirements for information collection, which currently applies to children under age 13 to teenagers between the ages of 13 and 16. So that brings in a significant additional number of people. It also proposes to ban targeted ads to children and teens, and it's contemplating also requiring operators to develop and provide an eraser button that will enable users to delete data collected from a child or teen. So that's COPPA 2.0. And then very quickly, another bill, Senate Bill 1748, which is COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, also was reintroduced. That was introduced originally last year as well. As currently constituted now, COSA would mandate that covered platforms, social media platforms and whatnot, have a duty of care to protect minors online, and that they must exercise that care in the design and use of features on their websites or apps. Anything that increases children's online activity is going to be covered by this, and operators are also going to be asked to provide safeguards to prevent harms to children like anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and the one that gets talked about a lot is just addictive behaviors. Kids, as we all know, kids spend a lot of time on their phones, and the feeling in Congress is that a lot of these products are designed to achieve exactly that, and they want to be able to get their arms around that. Now, both of these bills, as I alluded to earlier, were combined in a package last year in Congress, and it passed the Senate, with as much bipartisan support as you're ever going to see these days. It was 92-3 was the vote last year, but when it went to the House, it stalled. And so, that's obviously the problem. And, ultimately, at this point, there's a little bit of uncertainty in where it's going to go.
So, Tony, while you were talking, I searched for COSA in the Cybersecurity Privacy Library and filtered it the most recent, and there were a bunch of articles in Law Firm Perspectives. Can you give everybody an overview of what you're doing with Law Firm Perspectives here?
Absolutely. It's a really valuable tool on the dashboard because what it represents basically is expert analysis of the current issues of the day. And so as Bridget's showing this to you, you can see that what shows up is basically just a daily feed of recent developments where articles that have been written by experts in the field from law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms, all sorts of professionals are following the news and then submitting articles that we then reproduce in our Law Firm Perspectives. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to read from people who are actually practicing in the field in terms of what their impressions are and their analysis is with respect to the latest developments in the news. And so I believe that when you had your hit list, Bridget, there were a number of Law Firm Perspectives that discussed the COSA bill specifically. And so being able to see that sort of varied number of opinions and analyses, I think is a really valuable resource for customers to kind of make sure that they're tracking and following along just like these experts are. But it also provides an extremely boots on the ground kind of information that people can really, I think, have historically found extremely useful in sort of generating their own plans and trying to make sure that they're on top of the news. Right.
That's great. Okay, let's move on to the states. So what's the status? When I opened up one of those smart charts, we saw the California Age Appropriate Design Code Act. So I know it's being challenged in court. So where does that stand right now?
Yeah, this is one where I would say that there's a great deal of uncertainty, which I am going to contend is really incredibly important to stay on top of. The California Age Appropriate Design Code Act was enacted in 2022, and it was supposed to take effect on July 1st of 2024. Most folks on the call probably know that law, the California law, was modeled after the UK Age Appropriate Design Code Act, which is sometimes referred to as the UK Children's Code. And many of its key elements were taken directly from the text of the British law. There are some subtle differences, but for the most part, they're really obviously doing the same thing and trying to accomplish the same thing. At a high level, this includes high privacy default settings, making sure that companies that design apps and websites that are aimed at children conduct data protection impact assessments when they are processing material that is high risk or perhaps includes sensitive personal information, and requiring companies, just as a general rule, to consider the best interests of children in providing these services. The California law was challenged pretty much instantly after it was adopted. Within a couple of months. In 2022, NetChoice, which is an association that represents online service providers, filed a lawsuit challenging the law and maintaining that it violated First Amendment free speech rights of its members. NetChoice got a preliminary injunction against enforcing the law in September 2023. That injunction was partially lifted by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2024, but as of March of this year, the lower federal district court in California reinstated the injunction so that so far the California Age Appropriate Design Code Act has not taken effect. The district court found that NetChoice was actually likely to succeed on the merits of its constitutional claims. Again, it still needs to be litigated, but at this point, there is a significant amount of uncertainty about where that's going to be and what it's going to mean for companies as they think about starting to comply.
Wow. That's great. So interesting being somebody who is living in California right now. I just did a search through the cybersecurity and privacy area for the California Age Appropriate Design Code Act, and I included the AI generated answer just in case there's anybody on the call that hasn't seen our AI yet. And so the AI tool gives us a great overview of this and gives us the source materials. You can link out to those source materials, but all kinds of great coverage on here. From us. Anything else you want to point out that I haven't pointed out in terms of what you're providing to these people that are on the call that are doing this boots on the ground as attorneys?
Well, I'm going to talk in a minute briefly about some of the other initiatives that are going on in other states.
Yeah, tell us.
And so from that perspective, Bridget, if you could go back to the homepage for
Yeah.
cyber and privacy, one thing that I'd very much like to point out for folks who may not be familiar with it is in the Spotlight Topics panel, you can see that Bridget's actually right where she needs to be, which is the federal and state privacy and cybersecurity legislation tracking tools. And what those are is they represent our daily update to a spreadsheet that includes all of the cyber and privacy related legislation that has been introduced. Bridget's showing the state. The same thing is true for federal legislation. There's a separate tracker that tracks that. So if you look at this, you can see from Bridget's pulling up the spreadsheet that it brings up the jurisdiction, the bill number, gives you a description, a high level outline of the topics, and then what the status is of any particular legislation, anywhere from being introduced or in committee to having passed one or both chambers to having been signed by the governor or even vetoed by the governor and having the veto overridden. All of those statuses are covered here. And
you don't mince words, do you? Died in committee.
Don't exactly
no mincing of words.
Yeah, right. And then the other important things are towards the right-hand side of the margin, which is the official legislature website presentation, which takes you to the bill status page for each one. And then 4 high-level bills that we are covering in the news. There are almost 600 bills here. We're not covering all of those in the news, but we are covering a lot of them. We have a quite high percentage. And so you have a link to our analysis and commentary, stories from Cybersecurity Policy Report that you can link to directly that will show you the latest information that we have in our analysis of the status of any particular bill. And so for people who are trying to track legislation like the children's legislation that I'm going to be alluding to in a little bit, it's an incredibly handy and very comprehensive tool. And so what the trumpet I always blow is that it is really comprehensive, and I update it every single day.
Wow.
And so you're never going to miss anything because everything gets updated on a daily basis as things happen.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So tell us about the other states that are following California's lead on this, even in the face of the uncertainty about California.
Yeah, you would think, at least I would think, that the legal wrangling around the California law would kind of give other states pause, but that clearly has not happened. Many states are moving forward with legislation. Some of it is designed to protect children's privacy. Some of it is really more targeted towards online safety. There's so much going on in this area, and we are starting to run short on time, so we can't do justice to all of it. But I do want to mention that in a number of states, laws have been adopted or are being considered that would do things like restrict access to social media accounts for children, or to do other types of things like that, none of which is really a privacy issue. It's really, again, more of an online safety issue. These are things that we continue to monitor in thinking about, exactly where we want to land in our coverage of those. But the most important thing to note is that stuff is out there and that people should need to be aware of it. And stuff like that does show up in our tracker. But I did want to focus just very briefly on 3 recently enacted state laws, one in Maryland, one in Nebraska, and one in Vermont, because they have established age-appropriate design codes that are very similar to California's, despite, as I was saying, the uncertainty in California. The Maryland law was enacted in 2024 and was scheduled to take effect on October 1st of this year, so just earlier, well, I guess a little bit later than earlier this week, but like the California law, it's also subject to a First Amendment challenge brought by our friends at NetChoice. So they're basically making the same arguments. And so even though the law should have been in effect for 9 days now, it is not. It has been enjoined. Its enforcement has been enjoined. And so we're definitely going to have to watch what's going on with that law, and also the ones that I was talking about in Nebraska and Vermont, which are supposed to take effect starting next year. Nebraska in 2026 and Vermont in 2027. So anyway, I mean, just to sort of kind of button that up, given the uncertainty of the constitutionality of these laws, businesses still need to monitor the progress of the lawsuits, but they can't just sit on their hands. They need to ramp up their review of current privacy policies so that if they're aware of a state policy that's been enacted, even if it's subject to court challenge, they need to be preparing to make sure that if the law does actually, if injunctions are lifted and the law actually does take effect, that they'll be prepared to be compliant with the new provisions. And they can't just assume that legal challenges will foreclose, state attorneys general or other regulators from enforcing these new laws that are out there. And so the awareness, I think, is the key more than anything else.
Wow. Speaking of awareness, anything else people should be aware of, thinking about, taking away from this conversation, or anything else you want to warn them about? Final notes as we go out into the world, boots on the ground.
I would sum it up in one word that probably won't surprise anyone, because I've kind of been emphasizing it the whole time. It's diligence, right?
Right.
Businesses need to keep up to date on the latest developments and have to begin their preparations, if they haven't already, on developing compliance tools and making sure that they have in place appropriate security and data retention policies and procedures. There's bipartisan support, as I mentioned earlier, for, coming up with laws that are going to protect children online. You can see why it's not a particularly controversial point to make. The controversy surrounds ancillary issues like constitutionality, like freedom of speech, but no one wants children to be endangered online. So that makes me believe eventually there's going to be an overarching federal standard that should, provide decent protections for children while also giving businesses some certainty in terms of compliance. But in the meantime, states aren't waiting. We've seen this in any number of contexts, that if the federal government can't get its act together and come up with something that is going to be applicable across the country, then the states are considering and adopting their own provisions that businesses will need to deal with. So, repeating myself a little bit, but I think it bears repeating. Be sure to keep up with legislative developments in this area, review your policies and procedures, and hopefully once all of the legal wrangling and the political wrangling is wrapped up, businesses will be ready and able to respond in an agile manner to this landscape. It's a real challenge.
That's beautiful. And one of the ways that they can do that is by signing up for the Cybersecurity Policy Report on Vital Law, if they have the Cybersecurity and Privacy Library, which I think a lot of the people on this call actually do. Thank you so much, Tony. That was unbelievably informative. And actually, I just love the way you talk. I could listen to you for hours on end. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who came today. We appreciate you out there. And for anybody listening to this recording, thank you for listening, and happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month.